So for many of you, because you're familiar, I thought I would just take the elements that have to me been the deepest learnings in the last while in working with R.A.I.N. with myself. And my example is, we all have our kind of repeating stuck places. For me, all my limbic survival patterns arise when I start feeling sick and tired and have a lot of demands on me. And then I go into this a survival mode that's very self-protective, and it's got a lot of anxious and worry, and can I make it through this? And if I feel this sick now, am I going to be able to go to that retreat and actually da-da-da-da? You know, you get the idea. Well, I've had a recent cycle, very, very recently. I feel like I'm just emerging, so everything is quite fresh. The skins that I'm shedding, the raw, kind of new, fresh feeling my environment. And what I have found every time I recycle and really need to purposely wake up the two wings in R.A.I.N. is that as soon as I notice a stuckness, if I can remember in some way to say, may this serve awakening. If I can remember this is a portal. This isn't like something wrong going on in my life. There's an opportunity to deepen awakening. If I can remember that at the beginning of R.A.I.N., it becomes a kind of atmosphere that allows the whole process to flourish. I wonder if we'll just pause for a moment and just to invite you to check that out. You might sense for yourself anywhere that you've noticed is sticky. And it might be sticky as in you get caught in obsessing and don't like the way you're feeling about yourself, to sticky as in big self-aversion, reactivity, fear. But to pick something, some area where you know you get stuck. And see if you can hold it with that understanding and prayer that this is your portal. That the more intense the stuckness, the more the potential for awakening. And just a sense, if you feel sincerely, may this serve awakening. May this serve the awakening of compassion. Sense what happens. The recognize begins by getting this is a stuck place, kind of limbic dominance. There's an identification here as a self. There's severed belonging. May this serve awakening. So that's the recognizing. And then the allowing is some wisdom in you that gets that as much as the conditioning is to leave, that you want to get out of the cocoon, so you're willing to stay. So that's the allowing. And for me, it helps to in some way say whatever's going on, and often it's fear when I'm caught in this kind of vulnerable place, this belongs. That this is as much a wave in this ocean of being as anything else. So there's a this belongs. And you might experiment with that too if something's going on right now that you wish away, you wish wasn't there. Sense what happens when you send a message inwardly. This belongs. This is part of the beingness that's here. So just to keep in mind that when we're holding on to that skin, we're basically not wanting to pay attention to what's here and not wanting to stay with it. So this is the beginning of the shedding of the skin. Then we investigate. And I found that, the key, and this is something I suspect each of you is familiar with, in investigating, is to really dedicate to, I sometimes call it a U-turn, moving from that aiming at the thoughts, like thinking, to the U-turn right back into this body, wherever I'm feeling the vulnerability the most, over and over. To make that U-turn from thoughts right back here. You might feel the throat, the chest, the belly. And investigating is a way, a kind of inquiring or asking questions that help us to contact more what's really here. The energy, the felt sense, the emotion in the body. It can be helpful sometimes to ask questions like, well, what am I believing right now? For me, often what I find if I say, well, what am I believing? It's that in some way I'm failing the test, okay, that I'm falling short. But then I come right back to doing the U-turn, right back into where that's in my body, okay? So this has been what's helpful on investigating. The key thing that I discovered in the most recent rounds is how much, when I come back to the body, there's some part of me, some veil of belief that, well, others have it worse. This isn't so bad. And right now in my life, I have many friends, that one whose partner's dying, another friend who's been, is paraplegic, is in a wheelchair, and we don't know if she'll ever walk. And other friend that's, and it just goes on and on. I'm not going to keep going. But then it's very hard to give real attention to the place in me that's having a hard time. So others have it harder. And when I can register that belief and how in some way it's a pushing away and a dismissing, like this doesn't matter, this being doesn't matter, that is when there's a sense of, I sometimes call it the ouch moment, where there's real sadness springs up. Like how many moments have I not been just acknowledging, hey, this hurts, this is hard. This is hard. It's essential to be able to recognize it's hard. Because that's what lets us feel tender towards ourselves. And as long as we either are, and by the way, we treat ourselves the way our caretakers treat us often. And if they neglected ourselves, we neglect. If they judged, we judge. So in some way saying, hey, yeah, this is a challenge, but hey, others have it worse. Very, very familiar understanding, but have to feel it. And then for me, it brings up a kind of soul sadness. Like how many moments have I just pushed away the feelings that are here, in some way diminished myself? How many moments of life have I missed by in some way blaming and not being kind? So that's where the grieving comes up, and then it turns into the nurturing. And for me, nurturing takes that, hey, this belongs here, and it deepens into this very sincere, you really belong, I care, I'm listening. And even if you're just going through the motions of that, if you put your hand on your heart and say, I really care, I'm here, I'm listening, just going through the motions will reconnect you with an authentic caring. The gesture of kindness is very, very powerful. After that nurturing, for me, the deepest part of the nurturing, after I've kind of offered that, is when I feel the intensity, is in some way I take the feelings of powerlessness and grief and everything, And in some way, I offer it into the larger space of loving presence. It's like an ego can't nurture itself. It has to be held by something larger. So I kind of offer it to that something larger, which to me is kind of a field of, it's formless and tender. And I feel that washing through, coming, just really bathing me with loving presence. That's the fullness of nurture for me. And then it moves past any doing of R.A.I.N. And I just want to emphasize this as you practice yourselves. The key moment in the R.A.I.N. process that so many people forget is that after recognizing, allowing, investigating, and nurturing, to just rest in the being that's there. Get to know that being state. You know, it's just like after a real rain. That's when the fruits, spring forth. After we do the doing of R.A.I.N., just to rest in that being is a homecoming to who we are. And the more familiar we get with it, the more we realize that's more the truth than any self that we thought was struggling with fear or grief or anything.